This war is the first space war. That is, this is the first war in which space assets played a decisive role. While I would like to be able to tell you that America will always be there for you, I can't advise you to assume that that is true. Rather, I would advise you to create your own space capabilities. This is where the next war is going to be fought. What air power was to World War II, space power will be to any future large-scale conventional conflict between peer powers. And I believe that if we do the right things, the Russian invasion can be repelled, okay? If we don't, it won't be. And that'll be very, very bad.
Hello everyone, my name is Marek Stefan and I am a Deputy Editor-in-Chief in Układ Sił. And today I have a great pleasure to talk with Dr. Robert Zubrin. He's an American aerospace engineer, inventor, scientist, advocate and human of exploration of Mars, author and founder of Mars Society. Hello, sir.
Hello, thanks for inviting me for this interview.
Today, of course, we want to talk about the space, but let me start with the question about the war on Ukraine. Because we, especially in Poland, in Europe, we focus on this conflict. And what we see at the beginning of the Russian invasion, that the space technology have a huge impact for what Ukraine and what Russia can do on the battlefields. Could you tell us something about this impact of the space technology now in the because we are witness of the revolution in military affairs, and this revolution is deeply involved in how the space have an influence on the battlefield and the wars.
Yes, certainly. So first, I will address your question directly in terms of the immediate effect of space technology on this conflict. But then I'd like to talk about space in broader terms with respect to the threat of war and strategic balance and all of that. Mm-hmm. Okay. So first of all, to address it directly, this war is the first space war. That is, this is the first war in which space assets played a decisive role. The United States used reconnaissance satellites in Vietnam, and even GPS was used in the Iraq War, but these were never central to the conflicts. These were extras, these were frills. We would have beaten Saddam Hussein without GPS. It wouldn't have mattered at all. But in this war, Ukraine is holding its own against Russia due to space superiority, actually, provided by the Americans, but nevertheless, they've got it. And so they've been using space-based communications, space-based reconnaissance, space-based navigation systems allowing precision-guided munitions. So when they sunk the battleship, the Moskva, okay, they did it with 2 missiles. They didn't fire 50 missiles and 2 of them managed to hit. No, they fired 2 missiles and they both hit because they were both GPS-guided munitions. And that's how that ship was sunk. And the Ukrainians have made a major innovation in ground-air warfare in introducing the UAV, the unpiloted aircraft, mm-hmm. small, as a major weapon system, something as significant as, say, artillery, in terms of its role on the battlefield. Okay, it's a major arm. But the ability of those things to actually hit anything depends upon space-based communications and guidance systems. Ukraine, nevertheless, is outnumbered 4-1. So the Russians have 4 times the mass. They've got 4 times the artillery, 4 times the tanks, 4 times the men. Ukraine has space superiority. And between those 2 factors, the war seems to be at least right now, about equal. It's very apparent from this that in any future conflict between more closely matched opponents, the space superiority would absolutely decide the war, period, full stop. Okay, if one side has space-based reconnaissance, if one side has precision-guided munitions, and the other does not, the side that has it wins, period. So, you know, right now, the American military is looking at this. I'm quite certain the Chinese military is looking at this, and they're saying, this is where the next war is going to be fought. What air power was to World War II, space power will be to any future large-scale conventional conflict between peer powers.
Mm-hmm. So this is why you are advocate of the U.S. space superiority.
Absolutely. But also, I have to say, and actually I gave talks in Ukraine in 2018 and in Poland in 2020, where I brought up this point, that while I would like to be able to tell you that America will always be there for you, I can't advise you to assume that that is true. Rather, I would advise you to create your own space capabilities, because you live in a bad neighborhood, a tough neighborhood here, okay? And you got to be prepared to protect yourself. And you can't make your security dependent upon the way the winds blow in American politics. And so I think that it would be very important for Poland to develop its own full spectrum space capabilities, including space launch systems, spacecraft systems, the works. And this is one reason why, in addition to developing actual military space systems of this type, Poland should also take part in space exploration, because that is a very important way to develop the talent, to develop the technology that enables the next generation of, you know, military space systems and things of this kind. Okay. Now, there's another aspect to this, okay, which is, yes, we must deal with this situation that we have here now. Absolutely. Okay. And I believe that if we do the right things, the Russian invasion can be repelled. Okay. If we don't, it won't be. And that'll be very, very bad. But if we do the right things, this invasion can be repelled. But the situation, the threat of invasion, the threat of war is going to persist as long as there are tyrants, because tyrants need war. They need war, because war is the justification for tyranny. It is the justification for governments that can suppress all dissent and divergence, okay, and so forth, right? Because we have to be united, because it's war. And there's going to have to be war all the time. Why? Because there's limited resources. There's only so much here, and either we're going to get it or they're going to get it, okay? And if you have this point of view, if there must always be war, then tyrants get a pass, and they're the people who actually want war. So how do we refute this concept that there is limited resources? By opening space. Okay. Now, in other words, sending humans to Mars won't settle this war. This war is going to have to be settled now, and so forth. But unless we can undermine this thesis that the resources are available to humanity are limited, we're going to face another war, and another war, and another war. Sooner or later, our luck will run out. So this is why I believe that opening the cosmos to human settlement is essential for...
Is the recipe of the peace?
For peace. It is the recipe for peace, yes. That is it's one of the essential ingredients, okay? It's not the only thing, but it's an essential thing.
But I have some doubts, because, you know, it's very similar situation now, like in 15th century, when in Europe the states, the kingdoms decided to geographical discoveries in another part of the world. So in the past we also have some very brutal competition between states and which focus on resources. So I have some worries and concern about the next race between the states in the space, because in Mars, on the Moon, we have some resources. The states, the superpowers, want to get those resources, and they compete each other. Very brutal. So we should expect that the opening the space would be the recipe for peace on the Earth, or maybe it could open another chapter of very brutal competition especially between the superpowers.
Well, I take the former point of view. Okay, first of all, with respect to the issue of conflict between European states, say in the period from between 1500 and the 20th century, those conflicts were not caused by the fact that these countries were acquiring colonies and settlements in the New World or elsewhere. Those countries were already in conflict. Mm-hmm. Okay, England and France was in constant conflict in the Middle Ages before Columbus. Okay, and so forth. There was actually more war in Europe in the Middle Ages than there was in the period of the Enlightenment and so forth. But the 30 Years' War in Germany certainly wasn't caused by fighting over colonies. Some of this was religious wars and other such things, but they were not caused. For instance, the conflict between France and England was not caused by conflict over colonies in the Americas. They had conflicts in the Americas because they were already in conflict in the Old World. But here's the thing, look. Okay. If we look at the great catastrophes of the 20th century, they weren't caused by climate change. Okay. They weren't caused by scarcity of resources. Europeans were living better in the 20th century than they had in any previous century. In 1914, they were living by far better than any time previously. What is it that actually caused the world wars? And I believe it was this concept that there isn't enough for everyone. In 1912, Friedrich von Bernhardi, is one of the chief intellectuals of the German General Staff, wrote a book called Germany in the Next War. And he said, look, here's Eurasia, who's going to get it? It's either us Germans or the Russians. So we're going to have to fight them sooner or later. Should it be sooner? Should it be later? Well, clearly sooner, because we can take them down now before they industrialize. Later, Hitler, claims the laws of existence require uninterrupted killing so that the better may live. Germany needs living space. Okay, so forth. This idea that there isn't enough for everyone then creates this idea that war is inevitable. And if you believe that war is inevitable, that gives grounds for accepting tyranny as at least useful and perhaps required. And clearly, this is Putin's justification for his regime, is that Russia must be strong because war is inevitable, right? So we need the silная ruka. And I have to tell you, I know for a fact, because I've spoken to them, that there are people in the American national security establishment who believe that war with China is inevitable. Mm-hmm. Why? Because there's 1.4 billion of them, and if they all start driving cars like Westerners, there isn't going to be enough oil in the world. And you can bet your last dollar that there are people in Beijing who think exactly like them, but from the other side of the chessboard. And if that is how people think, there will be a third world war. So that conceit that there are limited resources, it's a false idea, okay? Actually, the resources of the earth are unlimited because resources, there's no such thing as natural resources. There's only natural raw materials. It is human creativity, technology, invention that defines what is and what is not a resource. And that is why, in fact, as the population of the world has gone up, the average standard of living has gone up, not down. Okay, exactly the opposite of Malthus's prediction. Because the more people, the more inventors, the more inventors, the more inventions, and inventions are cumulative. And so the resources of the earth have expanded radically, and precisely because the population has grown. Okay. However, that said, it is extremely difficult to try to convince the average person that the earth has infinite resources. It seems apparent that there's just so much here. This cannot possibly have infinite resources. To try to convince the average person that the earth has infinite resources is like trying to convince a mathematically illiterate person that there's an infinite number of points in a 1 centimeter long line segment. Okay? They say, oh, that's incredible. No, no, no. There's 1 centimeter long. It cannot have an infinite number of points in it. However, anyone can believe that there's an infinite number of points in a line that goes off infinitely in both directions. Okay, that's easy for an average person to believe. Okay, so the idea is that by going to Mars, we show that we're living not in a 1 centimeter long line segment. We show that we're living in an open line. Okay, and then finally there is one other thing. Okay, which is what will the nature of Martian civilizations be like? I believe that contrary to much of science fiction, Martian city-states, and I believe a city-state will be the form of Martian polities, will be free societies, not tyrannies. Why? One very simple reason is no one would emigrate to a tyranny. So while the extraterrestrial tyranny is a common theme in science fiction stories, and it makes great movies, the revolution against the tyrants, you're off to the races right there, right? But an extraterrestrial tyranny would die on the vine because no one would emigrate to it. That's point one. Point two is these city-states on Mars will have to be extremely innovative in order to survive and progress. And once again, that requires freedom. So, if you have additional free societies being creative, highly technologically creative societies out there, that increases, as it were, the throw weight of the free societies everywhere. You know, despite various disagreements over time between the Americans and the British, starting at the time of the American Revolution, nevertheless, Britain survived World War II because they had settled America. And there were other free societies in the world that could come to their aid. Okay? And there's another aspect to this is, I mean, look, why is SpaceX an American company? Mm-hmm. It's because it was only in America that a SpaceX could be created. There's engineering talent in Russia. There's people in Russia with large fortunes who believe in human expansion into space. They're there, but no one would start a SpaceX in Russia because if you did it, if it was successful, it gets stolen by some Kremlin gangster. But in America. So SpaceX is a product of freedom. Freedom will give us space, okay? Okay, it's going to enable the settlement of space. And the settlers of space will create further technologies, okay? So, which themselves, I mean, technology itself is a form of freedom. It frees you from toil, among other things, or want, or so forth. So freedom will give us space. Space will give us freedom.
That's what you say. What you said. That's lead me to the question about what is the difference between the old, the previous space race during the Cold War, than what we have now in the new space. What is the major difference?
Okay. Well, the major obvious difference is that the old space race was a contest between two superpower governments. Okay. There was basically, it was a two-player game, and it was the governments. Now, the U.S. government was able to call upon the superior creative potentials in a free society to win the space race against the Soviet Union, even though they had a head start. And this is another point, is that whenever a more challenging environment opens itself up to human activity, it always benefits the more liberal society. Okay, if you go all the way back to ancient Athens, up to the time of the British Navy, sea power was always dominated by liberal societies. Okay, then you get into the 20th century, you have air power, so that while the Nazis and the Japanese were the first to seriously exploit air power in war, by the end of the war, the Anglo-Americans had greatly exceeded them in air capabilities. And then, once again, while the Nazis and then the Soviets the Nazis, of course, developed serious rockets, V-2s.
Von Braun.
Yes, and then the Soviets, Korolev, who, by the way, was Ukrainian, were the first into space with Sputnik and the first man in space with Gagarin. By the end of the 60s, the United States had completely outrun them. But nevertheless, that was a contest between two superpower governments. Now, this space race is an entrepreneurial space race, which first of all means it's open to people from all around the world. One of the key new space companies, after SpaceX, one of the most successful is called Rocket Lab. It's a New Zealand company. And New Zealand doesn't even have a space program. And they've reached orbit, okay? New Zealand has reached orbit through entrepreneurial space, and they're about to launch probes to Venus and Mars, okay? Now, I believe Poland has about 5 times the population of New Zealand. So if New Zealand can reach orbit through entrepreneurial space, why can't Poland? If New Zealand can reach Venus and Mars through entrepreneurial space, why can't Poland? You can. It should.
You mentioned about the technology, and I want to ask you about how the current technology revolution, especially the AI, could have an impact for the new space race.
Well, in 2 ways. Okay, there's AI as applied to robots, and AI as applied to humans. Okay. If we're talking about space exploration, where robots have an extremely important role to play, I mean, the machines we've sent to Mars so far have not really been robots. They've been remote-controlled machines. That's what they've been. I mean, some of them have some hazard avoidance material, but abilities, but they're not really autonomous entities. They are not robots in the sense of a science fiction robot. They do not have brains of their own. They are automated space probes that, in some cases, can be actively remotely controlled. But with AI, you could turn them into actual robots, in which case their capabilities would be enormously expanded. Okay, so certainly AI, for creating much more effective automated instruments of exploration, AI is central. However, if we're talking settlement, now you're sending humans to Mars. I mean, that's what settlement is. I think AI could be also critical there for the following reason, that any Mars settlement for a very long time is going to be a very limited population compared to the nations of the Earth. I mean, very limited compared to the 8 billion people of the Earth, very limited compared to the 40 million people of perhaps Poland, very limited compared to the population of Warsaw. Okay, so, I mean, I think that, you know, in this century, there will be city-states on Mars with populations of perhaps 50,000, which is way beyond NASA's current planning horizon, but still much smaller than cities or nations of Earth are. And no city or nation on Earth of 50,000 people could possibly be autarkic using advanced technology. So, and one of the reasons is on Earth, the reason why we can have this very advanced civilization is because it's global. It has an enormous division of labor of 8 billion people. If you have 50,000 people in a Martian city-state, you're not going to have that. So you're going to want to have technology that enables almost anyone to do almost anything. In other words, you're going to want to unpack the practical wisdom of the Earth in terms of skills to enable any person to fix the air conditioner or to be a surgeon or to operate a greenhouse successfully, etc. Okay, so if you think of all the different skills that are needed to run this society, they're going to have to be present in a much smaller society. So think of an app that would give you that capability. Now, this would be a very popular app on Earth, too, I must say, and a very valuable one, actually. And this is an example of AI not competing with people, but AI empowering people. And I think the development of such AI is absolutely essential for the settlement of Mars, for example.
Mm-hmm. My last question to you. You mentioned about Poland a couple of times. We have the sector of homegrown space technology companies is developing quite well, actually. What could you advise here in Poland about what we can do, make even better to opportunity to ongoing space race? What we can do more to support our this branch of our new space industry here in Poland?
Okay, well, there's a couple of things you can do. First of all, the government could decide upon a number of missions, and these could include both planetary missions, but also, say, Earth observation missions, which are kind of like planetary missions, except you only have to go to Leo instead of across interplanetary space, and compete them. In other words, ask for companies to design the mission, or, well, they can present the requirements, say that we're going to be orbiting the Earth and looking down and identifying natural resources or fisheries or just doing mapping. And it shouldn't cost more than this, and it must be capable of that. Okay, and then rather than having a government bureau do the detailed design, let companies design it and propose it to you. And there'll probably be teams, because one member of the team is providing the camera, and another's providing the gyroscope, and another's providing the solar panels, and another's providing the overall spacecraft design and integration, and so on. And this is, and make sure they'll say our planned launch vehicle is Falcon 9, and and here's what the cost would be, and here's what the capabilities would be. And you compete it, and so by competing it, you encourage merit, okay? If instead of just saying, we're doing this in order to give business to this government department or this company or something, then merit is not being rewarded, okay? See, a free market requires both freedom to the people who are going to do the buying, that they're not forced by political actors to you know, we need to have a company in Gdansk get the contract, or a company in this city or that, or whatever. Okay, no, they're allowed to choose on the basis of merit, and the companies are allowed to compete based on merit. So, so the government agency could define the mission, but after that, they should let people say, this is how I would do it, and this is how we propose to do it, and here's our team. And yes, you select the team based not just on the nominal quality of the design, but also the capability of the team. Is this team capable of actually building this thing they're proposing, or not, you know, so forth. But you do that, and you do a number of such missions, you could create a real space industry. Now, there is also some merit to having a program comparable to the NASA Small Business Innovation Research Program, SBIR, where they take a certain fraction of their space budget, 1% actually, and they say, this is a set aside for small business, okay? And we need new technologies for launch vehicles, for, you know, parachutes, for imaging systems, for rocket engines, you know, they go through the thing of all the different things that you might need. And they compete, say, here is our innovative low-cost rocket engine, so forth. And then they get selected, and the way it works in the United States is they do it in phases. They say, first, we're going to give out $150,000 for a 6-month program, and you know, you propose what you can do with that kind of money in that amount of time. And then based on performance on that contract and whether they actually do demonstrate it and it works well, then some of them get a phase 2, which is $700,000 in 2 years, okay, kind of thing, and to take it to the next level. And the idea here is they're both creating technologies and they're creating companies. And you want to look for people who, by phase 2, would be able to begin commercial development of that technology. And in this way, you can encourage the development of hundreds of small aerospace companies, or maybe this one has developed a better star tracker, and this one has a better, you know, small rocket engine or something, and which can then become subcomponents to the overall missions that Poland launches. So I think that would be healthy as well. But, you know, so maybe some Earth observation satellites. Now, launch vehicles is tougher, but you can do it. I mean, New Zealand did it, to have a competitive launch vehicle. Now, if the Polish military is going to be launching its own satellites, there's a reason there to take a protectionist attitude. That is, you wouldn't buy ammunition for your soldiers from North Korea even if they could produce it cheaper than you can, okay? Because, you know, even Adam Smith said the British should not buy sailcloth from the French, okay, even though they could make it cheaper. Because in those days, sailcloth was an essential military item. It's what powered sailing ships. And as he put it, safety is more important than opulence. Okay, so there are certain things that you are willing to, defense items of critical nature you want to be able to make yourself. And a launch capability might be one of those. And doing that would help, because it's going to be hard for a Polish launch company to compete with SpaceX to start with. But, you know, you don't want either the US government or SpaceX deciding what you can launch and when you can launch, and if they feel it would be too provocative for you to launch a satellite on this particular day or something. You don't want to be in that position. So, Yeah, I think Poland should develop a medium lift launch capability that's capable of launching satellites and things. Because, I mean, I wish I could say, oh, you can just count on the Americans, but, and if I was president, you could. But, you know, you take a look at the Ukraine situation. Biden has been spooning out the arms to Ukraine, and Trump wants to cut it off entirely. So I do think Poland should develop a capability up to and including medium lift launch, and then all the different spacecraft technologies.
Mm-hmm. About the space, about the future wars in the space, about the Mars, of course. Today we talk with Dr. Robert Zubrin, American aerospace engineer, inventor, scientist, and the founder of the Mars Society. Thank you, sir, for your time.
Well, thank you.